This is the Dynasty Roundtable podcast, and the NFL draft is over. Shedeur Sanders has finally been drafted by the Cleveland Browns. It happened, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, Mel Kiper finally willed it to happen. I think Jimmy Haslam had something to do with this. I really do. I think it was the fifth round, and Jimmy Haslam was just whispering in Andrew Berry's ear, like, we got to draft. We got to draft Shedeur Sanders. We got to draft him. Come on, we got to draft him. Because, and I don't want to, I guess we're jumping right into this because F it. How does their quarterback room make any sense? Like, you have Deshaun Watson, who's going to be hurt. You have you signed Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and you draft a quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, and then you draft another quarterback. Unless they're going to keep four quarterbacks, Matt Babich, one of these quarterbacks is going to have to be cut, right?
Yeah, and I think the quarterback room going into the season is Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders.
Okay, so Kenny Pickett's the odd man out.
I think Kenny Pickett's the odd man out. He's the free agent signing, and there's gonna be a camp battle, obviously, and there's hubris on my part. Like, I have priors on Shedeur. Like, I know we've talked about not liking him as a talent that much, but at a certain point in the process, I kind of flipped and was like, okay, let's take it easy, guys. I don't think he's that bad. Not a first round talent. Understandable from the NFL's perspective. I thought, given the value of a quarterback, he was worth a later first round pick, like 21 to the Steelers. Thought would have made a lot of sense. But here he is now in Cleveland, and it's going to be him and Dylan Gabriel. I don't know about you, man. I think he's more talented than Dylan Gabriel. And I hope, this is from a place of hope, that he has this chip on the shoulder moment, puts in that work, and ends up making something for himself in this Cleveland Browns quarterback room. I kind of like what they did. First of all, getting Shedeur, falling this far, I think any team is going to get a thumbs up from me on drafting Sanders in the fifth round. At that point, if he becomes too much of an issue or a distraction, you can cut him. No harm, no foul. You're out. But there's all upside now, because this was a guy who, whether it was noise or not, was at one point, mocked to be top 5, top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Then you have Dylan Gabriel, who we love as a sleeper. John Lobb loves as a sleeper. Drafted all the way in the third round, above Sanders, above, a good amount of other quarterbacks in this draft. So clearly they saw something in him as well. So I'm kind of intrigued. And then you have Flacco here to mentor. There's some promise here in Cleveland with this quarterback room. Now, realistically, I don't think either of those two are going to pan out to be above average fantasy starters. But as a Browns fan, you're sitting there like, okay, this wasn't the draft for us to reach on a quarterback or, send out more draft capital to trade up for a Jackson Dart. You let the Giants do that. You get the guy you were mocked to, in the second round at some points anyway. In the fifth, you get another roll on Dylan Gabriel. So this draft went fairly well for the Browns, I think. Like, get 2 cheap shots on a quarterback, and you're going to stink and be in the hunt again next year.
Yeah, and the best part is they fleece Jacksonville and get a first-round pick next year, a second this year, and just to move down 3 spots. There were some other picks in there too, but if this doesn't work out, you have the escape hatch of the quarterback class next year with 2 first-round picks in that draft. So, and you're probably not going to be good this year unless one of those quarterbacks pans out. So it works out just fine. Were there any other takeaways that you had from the NFL draft? Any winners or losers that you want to touch on? Anything you have to get off your chest, because we haven't spoken since our last episode, which was before the NFL draft?
Well, I talked a lot of shit on Dane Brugler in our last episode, and
yeah,
I gotta hand it to him. I gotta hand it to the guy.
It's like he knows what he's doing. It's almost
like
he knows.
Well, a little bit. A little bit. You'll give him a little credit. Some things. I give Dane. Well, here's the reason why I'm not going to give him full credit on that. It's because McShay has been on that hype train for months now. So like Brugler, caving in and just going with what Todd McShay, has been has been going on podcast and tweeting out for like months now. I'm not going to give him all that credit, for making that call, because he put that on, and like literally the next day I listened to a podcast with Todd McShay on it, and he could not stop about the Saints and Tyler Shough. So, but yeah, it happened. It really happened. A second round pick on one of the worst quarterbacks I have ever laid my eyes on. Truthfully, what blows my mind about Tyler Shough is this sentence didn't sound ridiculous to anybody in the Saints draft room. Yeah, all it took was for him to turn 25, and then everything clicked in season number 6. And by everything clicked, by the way, I mean 3,200 yards and 23 touchdowns for a 9-4 Louisville team. All right. And this is the same Tyler Shough that through 2020 and 2023, which, mind you, were not his first and last season of college. That was 2019 and 2024. He threw 17 picks in 23 games. Finally, he's 6 years older than the rest of his competition. Now he's good. And even then, he had some of the worst combine throws I've ever seen in my life. I truly don't get, and I don't think any other NFL team would have taken him in the first 4 rounds. But the Saints did.
I am right there with you. It is one of the more baffling decisions that I've seen, because assuming Derek Carr is out for the year, potentially with a shoulder injury, you are running out the worst quarterback room, and we're throwing this up against the Browns too.
Yeah.
This is the worst quarterback room in the NFL. I mean, Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shough, and Ben DiNucci's in there. I can never remember the third guy's name, but he started games last. Jake Haener. With Kellen Moore. I mean, unless Kellen Moore has some magic in that playbook, I don't know if there's enough magic in the playbook to really make will this team into whatever they have to be in order for them to consider it a successful season. Now, they would probably tell you that Tyler Shough has the traits to be a good NFL quarterback, and I would tell you I have not seen anything on tape that would suggest that Tyler Shough is any good. And you may as well, in my opinion, have just burned the second round pick. Just burned it. Because the smart play would have been to do exactly what the Browns did, do exactly what the Rams did, because those teams can actually look into the future and go, you know what? We might need a quarterback. This year might not be our year, and I'm not necessarily talking about the Rams here, but the quarterback class next year is better. So what we'll do is we'll shift our attention to that year for our quarterback. Sure, we'll take a shot on Dylan Gabriel. Sure, if Shedeur Sanders is there in the 5th round, whatever, fine. But to take Tyler Shough in the 2nd round just shows me that the Saints continually will just never learn their lesson. And I bet you if you asked the team, hey, do you guys think you can make the playoffs this year? They'd probably say, yeah, we like what we have. And I'm here to tell you, you shouldn't.
I was so up in arms about it. And, my fiance was asking me why is this such a bad pick? And I was like, so first of all, he's not a 2nd round talent. And unless you're absolutely sure this is your guy, you're spending 2nd round capital, like all the things you just said, right? Like you're putting yourself into purgatory and you're wasting capital en route to still be bad and inevitably re-roll a quarterback again, if not next year, in a couple of years. So I didn't understand it at all. It would have been smarter for them if they really wanted to do something like this. Because let's say they want to kick the can down the road, right? Like give us somebody, a serviceable young guy that we can try out for 2 years, maybe bring in a vet. So we can play this kick the can game for a few years and, pile up picks and try and retool in that 2 to 3 year period. why not take like a Dylan Gabriel then in like the early third? Obviously, that may not have panned out with where Cleveland took him, but why wouldn't that be your game plan? Why are you spending a top 40, top 42 pick on Tyler Shough? It blew my mind, and thankfully, as I'm scrolling through Twitter, it blew everyone else's mind too, and everyone was having a laugh at the Saints, which I always enjoy.
Well, I was pissed because, and I'm just going to selfishly talk about this and completely change the subject. The Chicago Bears, you do realize they were one pick away because the Saints picked right in between where the Bears had their 2 second-rounders. The stupid New England Patriots, man. The Bears were one pick away. Think about this for a second. From their first 3 picks being Colston Loveland, TreVeyon Henderson, and Luther Burden.
Well, what? How are they going to take Henderson and Burden?
Because they had 2 second-round picks.
Well,
they had 39 and 41, assuming the Saints don't take Burden.
If
assuming
Burden was going. Although what's funny is what I heard. I haven't heard any insider information on this, but what I did hear was that before Miami traded up for the guard, it was between him and Henderson. So Burden, until the pick, wasn't even in the equation. And funny enough, Henderson said that he never even talked to Vrabel, or he talked to the running backs coach. That's it. So Henderson was just as surprised as everybody else. But what I love, we'll get back to the Bears in a second, is that apparently there was just a ton of deliberation in the war room, like positive disagreements, where you're having an informative discussion and you're, getting into it, because that ended up yielding, Henderson versus this guard. And that's a good sign. Like there's a lot of reports that like new head coaches like Gerard Mayo don't really think like that. Like Vrabel came in and knew what he wants in a prospect, and so did Ben Johnson. Clearly, you saw what the game plan was there. And funny enough, it wasn't just the 2 picks you're referring to. Jordan James, 49ers. Jordan James was also picked 1 pick before, or a couple of picks before the Bears, and the Bears also traded out of that pick in the 5th round. So it looks like Jordan James was also on their board. They tried hard to get it back. And what's interesting is none of them interested them between the 5th round and Kyle Monangai.
Yep. Who I like.
I like too, actually. Yeah. I didn't hate the landing spot for him there.
Yeah, and DeAndre Swift lives, I guess. He lives on to survive another day as the Bears' lead running back, which is possible. But yeah, Kyle Monangai in the 4th round of a rookie draft, I think is going to be a popular selection by me, because I think he has a pathway to opportunity. I definitely think Roschon's on notice, but I don't know. The TreVeyon Henderson, maybe you can, as a Pats fan, you can alleviate some of my concerns. Mm-hmm. I wasn't too Chicago would have been a much better landing spot for fantasy. It just would have been. And not to say that the Patriots landing spot is horrible, because it's not. I just think that Ramondre Stevenson's a pretty capable running back. I've always liked Antonio Gibson. He's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. I feel like Vrabel wants to do the committee thing. Now, the argument on the other side is, well, what about James White, Seth? This is Josh McDaniels, pass-catching running back. And to that, I would say, well, it's not perfect, because Tom Brady was the quarterback, and Tom Brady was the master of the dink and dunk, just matriculate the ball down the field. So Drake May's a different quarterback, but I think you have to be early round 2 to the Patriots. I think he's clearly going to be in the mix at the top of the running back depth chart. So not the perfect landing spot, but definitely still worthy of a middle 1st round pick in a super flex rookie draft.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there and say that New England's a better landing spot. That'd be foolish, because it's offensive based, right? Like we don't have to even necessarily consider the schemes. Like if Chicago and New England were both prospective elite offenses or bordering on elite offenses, we could say, well, he could land here, he could land here. Kind of depends on the scheme. Like this is not even at that level. Like we're in two different tiers of how we expect these offenses to perform in 2024. So naturally, Chicago was the better landing spot for fantasy. I think if a team were to make a surprise pick, like Cleveland took Judkins before Henderson, and I personally would rather have Henderson in this situation in New England than Judkins paired up, or than have Henderson paired up with Dylan Sampson in a even worse offense in Cleveland. I think that could spell for some trouble, especially early on in their career. I like the landing spot for Judkins. Don't get me wrong. He's still very high in my rankings. I'm just saying binarily, I would prefer the landing spot that Henderson found himself in versus Judkins.
Yeah, I can, and on the surface, you would say, "Oh, obviously, Quinshon Judkins got the better landing spot." But I would say that Judkins, I would disagree with you somewhat there. But I think Dylan Sampson's probably lower on the totem pole than Ramondre Stevenson in terms of like if you were just ranking running backs. But he could be better, I like him. I like Dylan Sampson a lot. So
here's the thing. Antonio Gibson is a scat guy. Like we know his role. Stevenson's trouble has always he's never been a great pass blocker, and that has been the big thing that all of these GMs have harped on, including I'm blanking on who was talking, but somebody mentioned that TreVeyon Henderson was one of the better pass protection running backs, coming out of college as a prospect that he had ever seen. Personally, I haven't heard that many glowing reviews to that degree, but that's something that I know for a fact Vrabel is going to want in an RB prospect. So for them to go in the second round without even really talking much to the guy for Henderson, like clearly there's a vision there for this offense. And I think what they want is a guy who they can be a little bit more volatile with. They can't trust Stevenson as much as pass blocking, as good as he is in both facets of the game, but that's where Henderson shines. So if he's going to be the pass blocker of the group, I trust him to be the guy who by midway through the season is going to be getting 65% of the snaps, maybe even the opportunities. So I think year one might be a little bit of a struggle for Henderson, potentially. But if you're a rebuilding team near the top of the first round, I'm not scared of that because year two, it's going to be wheels up. I think he's a potential 80% opportunity share back for a few years.
Yeah, definitely depends on what they do. I know they just recently extended Ramondre Stevenson, and then I think Antonio Gibson's probably not long for the team. But
I think they have out on Stevenson. But
I don't have the contract pulled up in front of me, but you're probably right. RJ Harvey going to the Broncos. I think that this is a smash landing spot, and all the people who had RJ Harvey in their top 5 running backs don't look so crazy now, do they? I think he automatically becomes a mid first round to late first round pick in Superflex rookie drafts. I mean, this is an offense with Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, Evan Ingram, now RJ Harvey with Sean Payton calling the plays. Sign me the F up.
Quick comment on anybody. I saw somebody with, of course, like nearly 10,000 followers on Twitter saying everyone getting excited about RJ Harvey clearly hasn't remembered that Sean Payton is horrible for fantasy football. Yeah, if you've only been alive for the past 2 seasons. Like literally, if you have only been alive for the 2023 and 2024 seasons, then yes, Sean Payton is horrible for fantasy. But if you look at literally his entire rest of his resume, that is not true. Look at guys like Michael Thomas who ate, Jimmy Graham who feasted, Marquise Colston. Gosh, I'm losing some names, losing some recipes from those teams. But my point, I'm not going to harp on it too much. But and I think what this person was potentially referencing to was the committee approach to the Ingram Kamara situation. And my response to that is twofold. A, Harvey is kind of the Ingram and the Kamara in this backfield. If you take the talent that they actually have in the backfield. You can argue that maybe Audric Estime fits more of the Ingram role, but it's a technicality. And secondly, both Ingram and Kamara were incredible for fantasy. So not only did he give you one fantasy viable running back, he gave you two. In fact, I believe one year they both finished as top 10 backs in fantasy points per game on the season. So Sean Payton knows how to run a good offense, a fantasy-friendly offense when he has the pieces, and he's just starting to be able to do that. Now, I don't know what he's doing at the wide receiver position, not going to lie. Mims, and they didn't use him at all, and then they selected Pat Bryant out of anybody in this class they could have taken. But in the terms of the running back position, he went after RJ Harvey. This is his first back that he's truly putting his stamp on. And when you look at the rest of the backs, it's like, man, even if they brought in Chubb, like Harvey's still probably the starter on this team. So it is just wheels all the way up. Spoiler alert, he's my 7th ranked player in this rookie draft right now.
Yeah. Some of the other running backs, and the running backs didn't get taken as high as many people would, as I thought. And, heading into it as we got closer, I kind of thought that this would happen. And so I wasn't shocked, but I was more disappointed because I was hopeful that, Dylan Sampson and Cam Scatabo and Bashul Tootin and a lot of these other running backs that did fall to early day 4. And then, of course, our boy Brashard Smith fell super far to the Chiefs in round 7. Jaden Blue had an interesting landing spot with the Cowboys. The Cowboys just completely punted running back, similarly to the Bears. Like, there are some backfields that are so interesting, like the Jaguars backfield with Travis Etienne, Tootin, and Tank Bigsby. Like, who's going to win that battle? I would say that the favorite might be Bashul Tootin. I'll just say that right now. The Cowboys, Javonte Williams, I guess, is the favorite to lead the backfield, but Jaden Blue's explosive, so I'm going to want some Jaden Blue shares. And then the Bears, who I guess DeAndre Swift, but I wouldn't rule out Kyle Monangai to really compete for some touches in that offense. So those are 3 backfields right off the bat, or right off the top of my head, that I would go, man. And then Devin Neal, who is one of my favorite running backs, falls all the way to the 6th round, but gets drafted by the Saints. We know Kamara's a little bit long in the tooth, and I'm not a big Kendre Miller fan, so I'm going to have some Devin Neal too.
It's going to be such an interesting topic as the offseason goes on. So a couple months ago, we were talking about how surefire this class was, and I offered the devil's advocate position. We say it every year, and then somehow these NFL teams come in and find a way to screw up our joy. And I think it's safe to say that for it happened a little bit. We were so excited for day 2 RBs, and it just didn't pan out anywhere close to what we wanted.
I said it on this podcast. I said, put your feet up, get your popcorn ready, because we're going to see a bunch of nope, didn't happen.
And I thought that's how I thought it would go too. But I did offer the position, like, let's think about it. And we're in the most interesting position, in my opinion, of how this could have turned out, because now this is true draft cap. This is in my memory, this is one of the best draft classes to measure pure draft capital versus talent and landing spot than I've ever seen. Like, think the Devin Neal in the 6th round. Look, Ollie Gordon in the 6th round of the Dolphins sounds gross, but think about what his skill set is that he brings to the table and why maybe they chose to take a shot on him. Like, he's a guy that deserves Xavier Restrepo getting paired with his college quarterback, but as a UDFA. Brashard Smith potentially in a Jerick McKinnon role as a 7th round pick. Kyle Monangai, 7th round pick. But then on the other end, Pat Bryant, 3rd round pick. Isaac Tesla, 3rd round pick. And it really muddies things up. And it's really gonna be a true test on all Dynasty gamers this year on how do you navigate how this draft went.
Yeah. So just to pivot to the wide receivers, obviously Luther Burden's one of the biggest losers in my opinion. One of the biggest fallers. Maybe loser is a harsh term to use. I don't know, but I think long term, it's a long term play if you take Luther Burden. But he fell to the second round in my rankings. Trey Harris with just a nasty, really good landing spot. Jaden Higgins, similar story, really good landing spot with the Texans. Jack Besh, I thought had a good landing spot with the Panthers, and Kyle Williams. I like where Kyle Williams landed as well. So some of these wide receivers, maybe it was as simple as the wide receivers were a little bit better than we thought, and the running backs, maybe the NFL, it was a combination of they thought they could wait on them, and maybe the class was just a tad overhyped. I'm not saying that these running backs are not going to be productive, because I still believe in the Cam Scatterbows. Obviously, Tootin. I talked about Tootin. I think he could win the job. I think he could beat out Travis Etienne. I think that's how good he is. But I think possibly it was a little bit overhyped. Any final thoughts here? I know we haven't really talked about tight ends too much. I mean, there were really only there were a few that went in the first round, Loveland and Tyler Warren. The Loveland picked the Bears was a bit of a shocker to me. Warren less so. I did like where Elijah Arroyo and Terrence Ferguson, our guy, landing with the Rams. I thought that was excellent for fantasy football. Any final thoughts as we kind of wrap up this special edition podcast? Not a full-length podcast, but just kind of a, it's turning into a full-length podcast, as things typically tend to happen with us. But
what I'll close it out with just one statement on the tight ends, which is in tight end or non-tight end premium leagues, I'm going to be taking more shots on tight ends than I normally do in drafts. And it's pure draft capital and landing spot. Like, look, I do not like Mason Taylor as a prospect. I don't. But in tight end premium, if my tight end core is depleted and I can't get my hands on Ferguson or Arroyo, like, I'm going to take shots on Taylor or even Gadsden. Got to say that right. In the, with a 5th round pick, but to the Chargers in what could be a very good landing spot for him, and a good spot to crack his way into some opportunities in a passing offense that we're going to want some shares of this year. So I think the losers are going to be some of these late round receivers in the 4th and 5th round, because there's a big drop off now between guys that we don't like but got good capital and guys that we like that got absolutely tossed aside. And you can either choose to search through that muck, or you can just try and take some value on running backs in decent position, like a Devin Neal, or throw some darts at tight ends. So it's a position, it's a draft where just let the value come to you, because even though the draft was gross, I still think there's a lot of value to be had on the board.
Yeah, and I know my strategy, as it usually is I'm going to be trying to mine for these. I'm still going to be, because there's so many guys I want to take shots on in the 3rd and 4th round of rookie drafts. So I'm going to be trying to flip these crusty veterans, people that still think that there's value in, to try to get, because I saw out there, and this is beside the point, somebody asking, is Jermaine Burton worth the 301? It's like, is Jermaine Burton even playing? Like, wasn't he in trouble? I'm honestly not sure. I know he's on the Bengals technically, but I mean, he's buried on their wide receiver depth chart at this point. So yeah, if you can get the 301 for Jermaine Burton, yeah, that's what you're doing. So if somebody is really out on the 3rd round, and I'm not saying that this class doesn't have a big drop-off point, because it does. This class all of a sudden just became really top-heavy, but that doesn't mean that there aren't guys that you can take shots on, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Like, Gadsden's a great name. I'm a big fan of Gadsden, especially landing with the Chargers. So I think that's a good takeaway as well. So I think that's going to do it for this special edition. Unless you have any final things to say, I think we're going to get out of here.
Draft Kyle Williams.
Draft Kyle Williams. Nobody cares about Aaron Rodgers. And we will see you later. Hope you had a great NFL draft. Bye-bye, everybody.